Aryan Khan mentioning in a WhatsApp chat, "Let's do cocaine tomorrow." Shah Rukh Khan was at Mumbai's Arthur Road jail just minutes ago to meet his son.
देशवासियों में आपसे कहता था कि बॉलीवुड की ड्रग्स मंडली में जो लोग अभी पकड़े जा रहे हैं.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post, where we don't cover the news, we cover the way the news is covered. Here are the media stories we're examining this week. His name is Khan. He's as big as they come in the Indian film industry. We look at the drug bust that tells a story of the conflict between the authorities there and Bollywood. Facebook and the continuing fallout from that whistleblower. A consortium of news outlets is now on the company's case.
You're at sea.
Alarm phone, the hotline in the Mediterranean that refugees are using to get their stories out. And je scroll, you scroll, we all scroll. What's it going to take to get us off our phones? On paper, it looked like a routine drug bust. A group of 20-somethings partying on a cruise ship off the coast of Mumbai, charged with possession and trafficking. It was anything but routine. Among those arrested was Aryan Khan, the son of one of India's and the world's biggest movie stars, Shah Rukh Khan. The circumstances suggest this case was never just about the son or the narcotics allegedly involved. The authorities appear to be going after his father, who is Muslim and belongs to a film industry, Bollywood, whose secular and liberal output conflicts with the ruling BJP party's Hindu nationalist ideology known as Hindutva. Aware of the film industry's sway on the masses, some say that the government has taken a two-track approach. On one hand, Prime Minister Narendra Modi makes nice with some of Bollywood's biggest stars. On the other, his government's anti-drug squads target the film industry, sending a message. Our starting point this week is Mumbai. A drug bust alleged on a cruise ship off the coast of Mumbai.
Aryan!
Among the 8 young people taken into custody, Aryan Khan, the son of one of India's and the world's biggest movie stars, Shah Rukh Khan, who happens to be a Muslim.
एक्टर्स ही नहीं, अब तो उनके बच्चों के नाम भी इस पूरे ड्रग्स के केस में आ रहे हैं. ये बड़ी बात है.
It is a salacious story, custom-made for Indian news channels that are themselves addicted to Bollywood.
बॉलीवुड का एक ऐसा नाम एक्सपोज हो जाएगा.
And the celebrity-driven stories it provides that drive ratings. The details are murky, and there's a larger pattern at play. The Indian authorities are targeting Bollywood and what the film industry has come to represent.
These twists and turns in the case almost make it seem like, a thriller in which one new episode is unfolding every single day. One finds that there is no transparency in the way the case is being tackled. That is why one is wondering whether there is more to it than meets the eye.
Many commentators have argued that it's Shah Rukh Khan who's the target of this case. But I would say that it's actually the Hindi film industry or Bollywood that has been targeted over the last several years by BJP politicians and their allied Hindu nationalist groups. So what I think the Aryan Khan case represents is a much broader assault on popular culture in India.
The drug bust would not have made news if the accused did not have a famous father. Shah Rukh Khan is a Muslim megastar who calls himself an Indian patriot. In 2010, he made a movie on the demonization of Muslims, delivering a line that stuck with audiences in India and beyond.
My name is Khan, and I'm not a terrorist.
Khan is married to a Hindu and is one of the faces of an industry that celebrates and exports stories of secularism and liberalism, an implicit rejection of the ruling BJP party's Hindu nationalist ideology.
Shah Rukh Khan represents an older ideal of India as a secular, multi-ethnic and pluralist nation. He's a Muslim who grew up in Delhi in really modest economic circumstances. He goes to Bombay to make his mark in the entertainment industry and succeeds wildly. And I think the very existence of a successful, popular, well-respected Muslim man challenges or threatens the Hindu nationalist ideologies that have been prevailing over the last several years, which are trying to portray Muslims as the ultimate other, outsider, or villain.
I don't want to believe that that is why he's being targeted, but there is a rising sentiment of Islamophobia in the country, and it is possible. Shah Rukh Khan, what he says travels all over the world. It is heard all over the world. If given the option of controlling that, I assume anybody would want to.
I don't know why people are focusing only on this party and this government. Since I was born in this country, I have seen every single government has intimidated anybody who's against them. Since independence, in India, politics and Bollywood have had a very strange relationship. Politicians have used film stars during elections to get votes. In return, Bollywood stars take favors from politicians. It's a dirty game, you know, and everybody is part of it.
Shah Rukh Khan is far from the only Bollywood figure caught up in an anti-drugs crackdown conducted by the Narcotics Control Board, the NCB. He's just the most famous name on a list that over the last few years has grown to include multiple actors, writers, and directors. Not all of them Muslim. In fact, most of those arrested are Hindu.
The first big drug-related case happened last year when an actor called Riya Chakrabarti was arrested, and she spent time in prison, and then there were people also called in for questioning by the NCB for drug-related matters. The Hindi film industry is the country's biggest soft power in terms of dissemination of ideas and thoughts and messages. It, to me, feels like an attempt to gain more power.
There were other actors like Shraddha Kapoor, Sara Ali Khan, and the superstar Deepika Padukone also called in for questioning.
8 top entities from Bollywood are very much part of a massive drug cartel. That's the bottom line.
Bollywood was being vilified left, right and center as though it was some hotbed of all kinds of crimes and a place which was hiding all kinds of criminals.
When Narendra Modi's BJP first came to power in 2014, the party was more focused on the news landscape than the film industry. India has more than 400 24-hour television news channels. The vast majority of them are now securely in the government's camp, some for ideological reasons, others for commercial ones, or just to avoid angering the authorities in New Delhi. In 2019, when running for re-election, Modi sent out this selfie with a group of actors. Like many prime ministers before him, he was trying to cozy up to film celebrities and their huge followings of potential voters. But the BJP's pro-Hindu conservative policies are not an easy sell in Bollywood, with its secular, liberal reputation. Those policies are far more popular with Indian news channels, which once again have the government's back.
The dark and rotting underbelly of the Bollywood elite is falling apart, and I can tell you it stinks.
If you take out the media out of it, suppose media doesn't highlight this, then nobody cares. If those 8 young boys and girls were caught minus Aryan Khan, nobody would have cared. Now media has sensationalized it.
कि इतने वर्षों तक बॉलीवुड के जिन नायकों को आप असल में सुपरस्टार समझते थे.
Indian television news media is an embarrassment for humanity. The biggest destructive force today is Indian television news media. They scream and shout and destroy lives. This case, they have made it so big that I'm sure that even judges must be thinking in their mind, if I take this decision, what will happen? If I take that decision, what's going to happen?
Let's call out, clean up and boycott the Bollywood dirt. What do you say?
If you look at how media has over the past few years been completely compromised, I see parallels because media and cinema are two very strong mediums, you know. One is bringing news to you, other is catering to your fantasies.
Sometimes when it comes to public figures, What doesn't get said is as revealing as what does. Indian actors have among the biggest social media followings on the planet, numbers that routinely run into the tens of millions. But if Shah Rukh Khan went online, searching for messages of support from within his own industry, he would find very few people willing to back him, at least publicly. That silence tells its own story about the hazards of free speech in Narendra Modi's India.
Many Indians criticize Bollywood celebrities for not being as politically outspoken as their Hollywood counterparts. After the election of Donald Trump, many people were comparing how vocal Hollywood stars were in their criticism of Trump as compared to how Bollywood stars could never be as outspoken. But I think there's real consequences for being outspoken in India. Celebrities could get trolled incessantly, their movies could be boycotted, and finally, they or their families could be in physical danger.
Even if political powers or government agencies don't come for you, there's also targeted online attacks, Twitter attacks, Instagram attacks that lead to loss of work. Not everybody wants to pay that price. Majority of them are not speaking. What that is a harbinger of, we'll find out. It just feels like another nail in the coffin of free speech.
Hardly a week goes by, it seems, without Facebook turning up in your news feeds for all the wrong reasons. This time, a consortium of news outlets has been publishing stories about the company. Nick Muirhead's been following these stories. Nick, beyond what we looked at just a few weeks ago, that whistleblower story, why is Facebook back in the news?
That whistleblower, former Facebook employee Frances Haugen, initially took her story to the Wall Street Journal, where she leaked thousands of internal documents to the paper. Haugen has now made those documents available to a consortium of more than a dozen news outlets, including the New York Times and Washington Post in the US, and European outlets like Le Monde in France and Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany.
And what kind of stories are we seeing as a result?
Well, much more detail, pretty damning detail, that Facebook is well aware of its problems with misinformation and hate speech in the US, but even more so outside of the US in non-English speaking countries, and it's doing very little to prevent it. Going back to India, in 2019, just before the general election, the documents show that Facebook employees set up a dummy account to test user experience there. That account was quickly flooded with no prompting, quickly flooded with pro-Modi propaganda and anti-Muslim hate speech. As you know, Richard, India is seeing an alarming rise in Islamophobic attacks. In Ethiopia, employees repeatedly warned that Facebook was failing to curb the spread of posts inciting communal violence in that country. Ethiopia now sits on the brink of civil war. And despite all of that, the consortium has also revealed that Facebook dedicates 84% of its efforts to combat misinformation to the US market alone. That just leaves 16% to the rest of the world. And the US market only makes up 10% of Facebook's business.
How has Facebook responded to these stories? Because they had to know that they were coming.
They did. They actually tweeted before the newspapers released their investigations, and they said that many of these documents are being mischaracterized and that it's all part of a gotcha campaign. That's on the back of news that Frances Haugen is getting a lot of backing from some heavy hitters, including Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, who is a well-known and outspoken critic of the expanding powers of big tech. So yes, there are elements of a gotcha campaign, but that does not mean that the consortium hasn't exposed some bad practices, more bad practices at Facebook.
Okay, thanks, Nick.